Why do people stay loyal to leaders even when they lie? Is it possible for gaslighting to occur at a societal level? Can political language be weaponized to stop people from thinking critically? And if so, how can we learn to resist the propaganda of personality cults? All of that and more in today's video. What happens when loyalty becomes more important than truth? When people commit themselves to a charismatic leader over ideas, principles, and policies, reality itself begins to bend around that loyalty. Facts become fluid, contradictions are ignored, and blind devotion takes the place of critical thought. Leaders who thrive on this dynamic don't just demand support, they demand faith, the kind that doesn't waver, even when confronted with outright falsehoods. In a previous video on navigating politics ethically, I analyzed how commitment to the common good can be jeopardized by identity politics that places loyalty to a tribe over commitment to objective truth. But beyond that, there's an even greater danger. Politicians may exploit tribal instincts to build cults of personality, wielding that as a weapon on a societal scale. Cults of personality don't just fuel political movements. They silence dissent and erode independent thinking. Once a leader can control what people believe is real, truth itself becomes a casualty. How do cults of personality arise in politics? The answer lies in the way that authority itself derives its legitimacy. The sociologist Max Weber identifies three forms of authority: traditional, based on customs and heritage; legal rational, based on laws and institutions; and charismatic, derived from personal image rather than principles. Charismatic authority, while often inspiring, is also dangerously volatile. It depends entirely on a leader's ability to maintain an illusion of infallibility. Since their legitimacy becomes tied not to an office or institution, but rather to their persona, leaders find themselves compelled to preserve their reputation at all costs through propaganda, coercion, or fear. As the philosopher Hannah Arendt observes in The Origins of Totalitarianism, totalitarian leaders alter the truth to erase their past contradictions, ensuring that criticism is treated not just as dissent, but as betrayal. To sustain this illusion, they systematically dismantle independent sources of truth. Language, too, is weaponized. George Orwell famously warned in Politics in the English Language that when political language is deliberately distorted, when euphemisms conceal brutal realities, and when us versus them language suppresses dissent, thought itself is manipulated. In short, the truest danger of a cult of personality isn't that it commands obedience, but rather that it reshapes how people think, believe, and even what they perceive to be real. Why do so many people fall prey to cults of personality? Unfortunately, the same weapons of manipulation that exist in personal relationships also exist at the societal level. According to the psychiatrist Robert J. Lifton, a key tactic of totalitarian regimes is Milieu control, isolating individuals from independent sources of truth and creating a controlled environment where only the leader's narrative can be trusted. Once people are severed from outside perspectives, their sense of reality becomes shaped by the ideology they're fed, making them vulnerable to gaslighting. As Robin Stern explains in The Gaslight Effect, gaslighting works by sowing doubts in people's own judgment. Victims begin to question their perceptions, unable to trust their own senses or experiences. Over time, this erodes their rational independence, leaving victims reliant on their manipulator to define reality. In political contexts, gaslighting works by distorting the truth and denying the reality of events, facts, or experiences in such a way that followers begin to doubt their own understanding of the world. The process is gradual. First, individuals are presented with small contradictions, either statements that don't match up with their lived experiences, or outright lies that seem harmless enough to overlook for political gain. But as this process continues, lies become bigger and increasingly difficult to reconcile. Over time, those subjected to gaslighting begin to feel confused, even paranoid, unable to trust their own memories or observations. This is what Lifton refers to as thought reform, the process by which a person's critical thinking is dismantled, leaving them open to manipulation. Finally, the victim may find themselves second-guessing their own logic, perhaps even feeling ashamed for questioning their leader in the first place. In this way, gaslighting operates on a psychological level, breaking down the individual's sense of self and replacing it with the leader's manufactured reality. Hannah Arendt's analysis in The Origins of Totalitarianism illustrates how this psychological manipulation works in broader societal contexts. Arendt observed that totalitarian leaders cultivate paranoia by characterizing their opponents as irrational, overwhelmed by hysteria, driven by base instincts, or acting as though they were subhuman. This creates an us versus them mentality, wherein the leader and their supporters are portrayed as the only rational, virtuous group, while anyone who questions or resists them is painted as dangerous, crazy, corrupted, and not to be trusted. Such a narrative forces followers into a position where they must reject independent sources of truth in favor of the leader's vision, which increasingly characterizes itself as the only source of order and clarity in an increasingly chaotic world full of malicious liars with personal vendettas or selfish conflicts of interest. This process of being disconnected from reality and isolated in a controlled ideological space results in suppression of meaningful dissent, allowing the most obvious contradictions to go unchallenged. Unfortunately, this process doesn't just happen in the shadows of authoritarian regimes. It happens in democratic systems too, where media manipulation, selective truth-telling, and the distortion of language can warp people's perceptions of reality, making them more susceptible to a leader's control. So, how do we resist the pull of a cult of personality and reclaim our independence from manipulation? The first tool to employ is critical thinking. We must resist the urge to conform to demands for ideological purity, instead fearlessly voicing criticism even of leaders we may ultimately support. For sometimes, the greatest danger of falling prey to manipulation comes from those we perceive to be on our side. We must resist what Lifton calls a cult of confession, wherein supporters are encouraged to publicly police themselves and confess their ideological failures, all while demonizing those who fail to play along. Second, we must support wherever we can true freedom of speech and independent sources of truth, supporting alternative media while demanding transparency and accountability, not just from leaders, but also from those who claim to report the truth. Third, we must reconnect with each other. Cults of personality thrive on dividing people against each other, so if we recommit ourselves to standing in solidarity with our local communities on the basis of our common interests and goals instead of our ideology, ideologues will find it far more difficult to manipulate us. Finally, we must reclaim our sense of agency, recognizing that our power to perceive reality is stronger than what politicians and political pundits would like us to believe. We should be willing and eager to break free of oversimplified categorizations that try to confine us to boxes, and we should strive to view others with the same complexity and nuance with which we ourselves would like to be understood. People are stronger together, not by uniting behind a charismatic leader or against a common enemy, but by being a truly united public that stands in solidarity for the defense of individual dignity and the promotion of the common good, holding leaders accountable so that they're answerable to the public they claim to support. What do you think? How can we be better at resisting the influence of political cults of personality? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified when new videos are released. Also be sure to like this video so that YouTube recommends it to others. If you would like to support this channel for as little as $1 a month, you can also become a supporter on Patreon. Links in the description of this video. The truth is within us all, and while the forces of manipulation may try to cloud our judgment, the power to reclaim our clarity, our autonomy, and our sense of self is always in our hands. It's not an easy road, and we may stumble, but every effort to think critically, to stand for truth, and to connect with others in a meaningful way is victory for our freedom. Together, we can rebuild a world where truth and integrity guide us forward. Peace be with you. This has been The Philosopher.